Good morning, everybody. I'm here to continue our reading of Racing in the Rain. Today we'll be reading pages 69 through 88, and that's 4 chapters, chapter 14 through chapter 18. Last we left, Denny had come home from racing and had gotten in an argument with Eve, and Eve was opening a package of hot dogs for Zoe and sliced her hand pretty bad with the knife that she was using to open it. At the end of the day, everything kind of calmed down, and they were watching TV together last we left them. So go ahead and find a comfy spot in your home where you can just relax, get our reader's brain thinking, and here we go. Enzo's point of view. Chapter 14. When Denny went away the following week, we went to Eve's parents' house so they could take care of us. Eve's hand was bandaged up, which indicated to me that the cut was worse than she had let on. But it didn't slow her down much. Maxwell and Trish, the twins, lived in a very fancy house on a large parcel of wooded land on Mercer Island. It had an amazing view of Lake Washington and Seattle. And for such a beautiful place to live, they were among the most unhappy people I've ever met. Nothing was good enough for them. They were always complaining about how things could be better. When we arrived, they started in about Denny right away. He doesn't spend enough time with Zoe. He's neglecting Eve. His dog needs a bath. Like my cleanliness had anything to do with it. What are you going to do? Maxwell asked Eve. They were standing around in the kitchen while Trish cooked dinner, making something that Zoe would inevitably hate. It was a warm spring evening, so the twins were wearing polo shirts with their slacks. Maxwell and Trish were drinking Manhattan cocktails with cherries. Eve, a glass of wine. I'm going to get in shape, Eve said. I feel fat. I mean about Denny, Maxwell said. What do I need to do about Denny? Eve asked. Something. What's he contributing to your family? You make all the money. He's my husband, and Zoe's father, and I love him, replied Eve. What else does he need to contribute to our family? Maxwell snorted and slapped the counter. I flinched. You're scaring the dog, Trish pointed out. She rarely called me by name. I'm just frustrated, Maxwell said. I want the best for my girls. Whenever you come to stay here, it's because he's gone racing. It's no good for you. This season is really important for his career, Eve said, trying to remain steadfast. I wish I were able to be more involved, but I'm doing the best I can, and he appreciates that. What I don't need is you going after me for it. I'm sorry, Maxwell said, holding up his hands in surrender. I'm sorry. I just want what's best for you. I know, Daddy, said Eve, and she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. I want what's best for me, too. She took her wine outside into the backyard, and I lingered. Maxwell opened the refrigerator and retrieved a jar of hot peppers he liked to eat. He opened the jar and squeezed his fingers inside, took one, and crunched into it. The dog is watching you, Trish said after a moment. Maybe he wants a pepper. Maxwell's expression changed. Want a treat, boy? He asked, holding out a hot pepper. That's why I had been watching him. I was watching him to better understand the meaning. Oh, that wasn't why I had been watching him. I was watching him to better understand the meaning of his words. Still, I was hungry, so I sniffed at the pepper. They're good, he prompted. Imported from Italy. I took the pepper from him and immediately felt a prickling sensation on my tongue. I bit down and a burning liquid filled my mouth. I quickly swallowed and thought I was done with the discomfort. I thought surely the acid in my stomach would cancel out the acid of the pepper. But that's when the pain really began. My throat felt as though it had been scraped raw. My stomach churned. I immediately left the room and the house. Outside the back door, I lapped at my bowl of water, but it didn't seem to help. I made my way to a nearby shrub and lay down in the shade and rested until the burning went away. That night, Trish and Maxwell took me out, as Zoe and Eve had long been asleep. They stood at the back porch and repeated their silly saying, "Get busy, boy, get busy." Still feeling somewhat queasy, I ventured away from the house, farther than I usually did, crouched in my stance and went. After I did my business, I saw that it was very loose and watery, and when I sniffed at it, it was unusually foul-smelling. I knew I was safe, and the ordeal had passed. Still, since that time, I've never accepted food from anybody I didn't fully trust. Chapter 15. The weeks tripped by with tremendous haste. There was no let-up. Denny got his first victory at Laguna in early June, then third place at Road Atlanta, and he finished 8th in Denver. That week with the boys in Sonoma, they had worked out the kinks with the crew, and it was all on Denny's shoulders, and his shoulders were broad. That summer, when we gathered around the dinner table, there was something to talk about. Trophies, photographs, replays on television late at night. Suddenly, people were hanging around, coming for dinner. Not just Mike from work, but others too. We were even introduced to Luca Pantoni, a very powerful man at Ferrari headquarters in Maranello. I never broke my rule about staying out of the dining room. I have too much integrity for that. But I sat upon the threshold, I assure you. My toenails edged over the line so that I could be much closer to the greatness. I learned more about racing in those few weeks than I had in all my years of watching video and television. Zoe chattered away constantly, always something to say, always something to show. She would sit on Denny's knee with her big eyes absorbing every word of the conversation. Then, at an appropriate moment, she would declare some racing truth Denny had taught her. Slow hands in the fast stuff, fast hands in the slow stuff. And all the men would be impressed. I was proud of her in those moments. Since I was unable to impress the racing men with my own knowledge, the next best thing was experiencing it through Zoe. Eve was happy again. She took what she called MAT classes and gained muscle tone. Her health had greatly improved with no explanation. No more headaches, no more nausea. She and Denny seemed to be happy together like in the old days. Yet for every peak there is a valley. Denny's next race was very important. A good finish would solidify his position as Rookie of the Year. In that race at Phoenix International Raceway, Denny got into a crash at the first turn. This is the rule of racing. No race has ever been won in the first turn, but many have been lost there. He got caught in a bad spot. Someone tried to pass him going into the turn, and his brakes locked up. Tires don't work if they aren't rolling. In full-out skid, the other car slammed into Denny's left front wheel, destroying the car's alignment. The front of the car was skewed so badly that his car crabbed up the track, taking seconds off his lap time. Alignment, brake lockup, crabbing. Mere jargon. What matters is that Denny's car was broken. He finished the race, but he finished dead last. It just doesn't seem fair, Eve said. It was the other driver's fault. If it was anybody's fault, Denny said, it was mine, for being where I could let it happen. This is something I'd heard him say before. Getting angry at another driver for a driving incident is pointless. You need to watch the drivers around you, understand their skill, confidence, and aggression levels, and drive with them accordingly. Now, know who is driving next to you. Any problems that may occur have ultimately been caused because of you. Because you are responsible for where you are and what you are doing there. Still, fault or no, Denny was crushed. Zoe was crushed. Eve was crushed. I was too. We had come so close to greatness. We had smelled it, and it smelled like roast pig. Everybody likes the smell of roast pig, but what's worse, smelling that roast and not feasting, or not smelling the roast at all. August was hot and dry, and the grass all around the neighborhood was brown and dead. Denny spent his time doing math. By his figurings, it was still possible for him to win in the top 10 in the series and likely to win Rookie of the Year. Either result would assure him of getting another ride the following year. We sat on the back porch, basking in the early evening sun, the smell of Denny's freshly baked oatmeal cookies wafting from the kitchen, Zoe running in the sprinkler, Denny massaging Eve's hand gently, giving it life. I was on the deck doing my best impression of an iguana, soaking up all the heat I could to warm my blood, hoping that if I absorbed enough, it would carry me through the winter. And it would likely be cold, dark, and bitter winter, as a hot Seattle summer usually signifies. I miss you when you're not here, Eve said. So come with me next week, replied Denny. Zoe will love it. We'll stay where they have a pool. She loves anything with a pool, and you can come to the track and race. Oh, for the race. I can't go to the track, Eve said. Not now. I wish I could. I really do. But I've been feeling good lately, and I'm afraid. The track is so loud and it's hot and it smells like rubber and gas. And the radio blasts static into my ears and everyone's shouting at each other so they can be heard. It might give me I might react badly to it. Denny smiled and sighed. Even Eve cracked a smile. Do you understand? She asked. I do, Denny answered. I did too. Everything about the track. The sounds, the smells, walking through the paddock, the inner circle of the track where they work on cars, feeling the energy, the heat of racing motors coming from each pit. The electricity that ripples up and down the paddock when the announcer calls the next race group to start up, watching the frantic scramble of the start, and then imagining the possibilities. Denny and I fed off of it. It gave us life. But I totally understood that what filled us with energy could be irritating to someone else, especially Eve. Denny and Eve looked out to the lawn, and I looked with them, and we all watched Zoe, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders in glistening locks, her childish bikini and tanned feet. She ran circles around the sprinkler, her shrieks and squeals and laughs echoing through Central District streets. Chapter 16. Your car goes where your eyes go. We've heard that before. We went to Denny Creek, not because it was named after Denny, it wasn't, but because it was such an enjoyable hike. With Zoe clumping along in her first pair of waffle stompers, me cut loose from my leash. Summer in the Cascades is always pleasant and cool under the canopy of cedars and alders. The beaten path is packed down, making long strides easy. Off the beaten path, where dogs prefer, is a soft and spongy bed of fallen needles. And the smell. Richness and fertility, growth and death, and food and decay, waiting, just waiting for someone to smell it. Lingering close to the ground in layers, a good nose like mine can separate each odor to identify and enjoy each distinct scent. I rarely let myself go, practicing to be restrained like men are. But that day, I ran through those woods wildly, like a crazy dog, diving through the bushes, over the fallen trees, giving gentle chase to chipmunks, barking at the jays, rolling over and scratching my back on the sticks and leaves and needles and earth. We made our way along the path, up the hills and down, eventually arriving at the slippery slabs, as they are called, where the creek runs over a series of broad, flat rocks, pooling at some points, streaming at others. Kids love the slippery slabs as they slide through the stream. And so we arrived, and I drank water, cold and fresh, the last of this year's snowmelt. Zoe and Denny and Eve stripped down to their swimsuits and bathed gently in the waters. Zoe was old enough to slide by herself, and Denny took the lower, and Eve took the upper, and they slid Zoe down the stream of water. Eve giving a push, Zoe slipping down. The rocks weren't slippery when dry, but when wet, there was a film on them that made them quite slick. Down she would go, squealing and squirming, splashing into the frigid pool at Denny's feet. He would snatch her up and whisk her back to Eve, who would slide her down again and again. People, like dogs, love repetition. Chasing a ball, going around the track in a race car, sliding down a slide. Because as much as each incident is similar, so it is different. Denny and Eve passed Zoe back and forth safely between them. Until once, Eve dipped Zoe into the stream, and Zoe suddenly pulled her toes from the icy water, upsetting Eve's balance. Eve shifted her weight and managed to set Zoe down safely on the dry rock, but her move was too quick. Her foot touched the creek, and she didn't realize how slippery those rocks were. Slippery slabs like glass. Her legs went out from underneath her. She reached out, but her hand grasped only air. Her fist closed, empty. Her head hit the rock, and with a loud crack, it bounced. It hit and bounced and hit again, like a rubber ball. We stood. It seemed like for a long time, waiting to see what was going to happen. Eve lay unmoving, and there was Zoe, again the cause, not knowing what to do. She looked at her father, who quickly bounded up to both of them. "Are you okay?" Eve blinked hard, painfully. There was blood in her mouth. "I bit my tongue," she said woozily. "How's your head?" Denny asked. "Hurts." "Can you make it back to the car?" With me in the lead, herding Zoe, Denny steered Eve. She wasn't staggering, but she was lost, and who knows where she would have ended up if someone hadn't been with her. It was early evening when we got to the hospital in Bellevue. "You probably have a minor concussion," Denny said. "But they should check it out." "I'm okay," Eve repeated over and over. But clearly, she wasn't okay. She was dazed and slurring her words, and she kept nodding off. Denny would wake her up, saying something about not falling asleep when you have a concussion. They all went inside and left me in the car with the windows open a crack. I settled into the pocket-like passenger seat of Denny's car and forced myself to sleep. Chapter 17. In Mongolia, when a dog dies, he's buried high in the hills, so people cannot walk on his grave. The dog's master whispers into the dog's ear his wishes that the dog will return as a man in his next life. Then, a piece of meat or fat is placed in his mouth to sustain his soul on its journey. Before he comes back to life as a man, the dog's soul is free to travel the land, to run across the high desert plains for as long as it would like. I learned that from a program on the National Geographic Channel, so I believe it is true. Not all dogs return as men, they say. Only those who are ready. I am ready. Chapter 18. Quick chapter. It was hours before Denny returned, and he returned alone. He let me out, and I could barely scramble from the seat before unleashing a torrent of urine on the lamppost in front of me. "Sorry, boy," he said. "I didn't forget about you." When I had finished, he opened a package of peanut butter sandwich crackers, which he must have gotten from a vending machine. I love those crackers the best. It's the salt and the butter in the crackers mixed with the fat in the peanuts. I tried to eat slowly, savoring each bite, but I was too hungry, and I swallowed them so quickly I barely got to taste them. What a shame to waste something so wonderful on a dog. Sometimes I hate what I am so much. I sat by the parking lot for quite a long time, not speaking or anything. He seemed upset, and when he was upset, I knew the best thing I could do was be available for him. So I lay next to him and waited. Denny and I sat at length and watched the people coming and going from the parking lot. We did nothing more than breathe. We did not need conversation to communicate with each other. After a while, a car pulled into the parking lot and parked near us. It was a beautiful Alfa Romeo in mint condition. Mike got out slowly and walked toward us. I greeted him and he gave me a perfunctory pat on the head. He continued over to Denny and sat down in my spot on the bench. "I appreciate this, Mike," Denny said. "Hey man, no problem," said Mike. "What about Zoe?" "Eve's dad took her to their house to put her to bed," replied Denny. Mike nodded. The crickets were louder than the traffic from the nearby Interstate 405, but not by much. We listened to them, a concert of crickets, wind, leaves, cars, and fans on the roof of the hospital building. Here's why I will be a good person. Because I listen. I cannot speak, so I listen very well. I never interrupt. I never change the course of the conversation with a comment of my own. People, if you pay attention to them, change the direction of one another's conversation constantly. It's like having a passenger in your car who suddenly grabs the steering wheel and turns you down a side street. Learn to listen. I beg of you. Pretend you're a dog like me and listen to other people rather than steal their stories. I listened that night and I heard. "How long will they keep Eve?" Mike asked. "They might not even do a test," said Denny. "They might just go in and take it out. Cancer or not, it's still causing problems. The headaches, the nausea, the mood swings." "Sorry," Mike said. I'm just so sorry." He grabbed me by the scruff and gave me a shake. "Really, though," he said, "I'd be freaking out right now if I were you." Denny stood up tall. For him, he wasn't a tall guy. He was a Formula One guy, well-proportioned and powerful, but scaled down, a flyweight. "I am freaking out," he said. Mike nodded thoughtfully. "You don't look it. I guess that's why you're such a good driver," he said. And I looked at him quickly. That was just what I was thinking. "You don't mind stopping by my place and getting his stuff?" Denny took out his key ring, picked through the bundle. "The food's in the pantry. Give him a cup and a half. He gets 3 of those chicken cookies before he goes to bed. Take his bed. It's in the bedroom. And take his dog. Just say, 'Where's your dog?' and he'll find it. Sometimes he hides it." He found the house key and held it out for Mike, letting the other keys dangle. "It's the same for both locks," he said. "We'll be fine," Mike said. "Do you want me to bring you some clothes?" "No," Denny said. "I'll go back in the morning and pack a bag if we're staying." No words then. Just crickets, wind, traffic, fans blowing on the roof, a distant siren. "You don't have to keep it inside," Mike said. "You can let it go. We're in a parking lot." Denny looked up at Mike. "This is why she didn't want to go to the hospital." "What?" Mike asked. "This is what she was afraid of," said Denny. Mike nodded, but clearly he didn't understand what Denny was saying. "What about your race next week?" he asked. "I'll call Johnny tomorrow and tell him I'm out for the season," Denny said. "I have to be here." Mike took me to our house to get my things. I was humiliated when he said, "Where's your dog?" I didn't want to admit that I had slept with a stuffed animal, but I did. I loved that dog, and Denny was right. I did hide it during the day because I didn't want Zoe to add it to her collection. And also, I was afraid of the virus that possessed that zebra. But I got my dog out of his hiding spot under the sofa, and we climbed back into Mike's Alpha and went to his house. His partner asked how it all went, and Mike brushed him off right away and poured himself a drink. "That guy is bottled so tight," Mike said. He's going to have a heart attack or something. Mike's partner, Tony, picked up my dog that I had dropped on the floor. We have to take this too? He asked. Listen, Mike sighed. Everyone needs a security blanket. What's wrong with that? It stinks, Mike's partner said. I'll wash it. And he put it in the washing machine. My dog! He took the first toy that Denny ever gave me and stuck it into the washing machine. With soap! I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. No one had ever handled my dog in such a way. I watched through the glass window of the washing machine as it spun around and around, sloshing with the suds. And they laughed at me. Not meanly. They thought I was a dumb dog. All people do. They laughed and I watched, and when it came out, they put it in the dryer with a towel, and I waited. And when it was dry, they took it out and gave it to me. Tony took it out, and it was warm, and he handed it to me and said, Much better, right? When Tony handed me my dog, I took it in my mouth out of respect. I took it to my bed because that's what Denny would have wanted me to do, and I curled up with it. And the funny part, I liked it. I liked my stuffed dog better clean than smelly, which was something I would never have imagined, but which gave me something I could hold on to, a belief that the center of our family could not be changed by a chance occurrence, an accidental washing, an unexpected illness. Deep in the center of our family existed a bond. Denny, Zoe, Eve, me, and even my stuffed dog. However things might change around us, we would always be together. And that's the end of chapter 18. We'll read chapter 19 and a few more on Thursday. Watch for the video to go up on YouTube. I hope you guys enjoyed reading with me today, and I will see you in our next Zoom meeting. Bye, guys.